Now, the Buckeye Extra podcast with Rob Aller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hello, Buckeye fans. Welcome back to the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Bill Rabinowitz. It's Thursday, February 13th, and a fair bit has happened around Ohio State football in terms of the coaching staff since we last recorded a podcast a little over a week ago. That was in the aftermath of Chip Kelly leaving for the Las Vegas Raiders. At that time, Ohio State had vacancies at both its offensive and defensive coordinator spots. At the time of this recording, none of the hires have been announced, but everything is trending toward a full coaching staff that includes largely promotions on the offensive side of the ball. Brian Hartline moving back to a role as the primary offensive coordinator, Billy Fessler in line to be the quarterback's coach. And then on the defensive side of the ball, on Wednesday, Ohio State really picked up the pace of its search, and all signs point to Matt Patricia being the next defensive coordinator of Ohio State. So that's the latest. They make an internal move on offense, and it looks like an external one on defense.
Yeah, the Hartline one is interesting because we should point out that Rob Aller usually joins us, is on vacation, the slacker this week. So
and I
missed last week.
Next week.
And you're on vacation next week, so I'm not sure what we'll do next week. I missed the last one because I was out at a funeral. So just the two of us, Joey, just the two of us. The Hartline one is interesting because, of course, he was the coordinator 2 years ago, in title at least. He did not call the plays. Ryan Day had not relinquished those duties yet, although he wanted to. He just, and we kind of waited all year. Is Hartline going to call plays? What's he doing with that? It was very murky. We never really knew. And, well, basically, he didn't. He didn't call the plays. Ryan Day did call the plays. My understanding is that he'll be more likely to call the plays. The Hartline will be more likely to call the plays this year. I mean, I would also think that Ryan Day will be very involved. We kind of joked that, okay, Ryan Day will call the plays against Texas, and Hartline could call them against Grambling. That kind of thing. Brian Hartline is, I think, without question, the best wide receivers coach in the country. You look at what he's done in terms of recruiting, what he's done in terms of development. It's this pipeline of talent that's been unmatched. And clearly he's in line for a promotion. I mean, that's why they gave it to him 2 years ago. He wasn't ready to call plays then. He's learned a lot, I would think, under Chip Kelly last year. And so this is the next step in his progression. We'll see how it works. We'll see. He's a hardworking guy. I mean, he's obviously a talented guy. That just remains to be seen how well it works out.
Yeah, they 2 years ago were in a situation where it looked like he was going to have a chance to call plays because they gave Brian Hartline that opportunity in spring practice, and they went all the way up into like a week before the season where Ryan Day ultimately kept play calling. I think it's important for them to try to see if they can delegate and get stuff off Ryan Day's plate in the regular season. But as you said, Bill, he's going to be involved in the game planning. And he made that very clear during Ohio State's playoff run that he was involved in the game plan, even with Chip Kelly in place as the offensive coordinator. So I actually think the structure of the sport in college football is such now where you just need somebody to handle the regular season. It's not this one game is going to make or break a season in the same way. You need somebody who can get you to a 10-2, 11-1 type of record, get in the postseason, and at that point in time, Ryan Day's probably going to have a larger share of the play calling.
Yeah, the other side of the ball,
to be more involved.
Yeah, look, he's a CEO for most of the year because he's got to deal with NIL, he's got to transfer portal issues. There's just a lot on a head coach's plate that wasn't there 5 years ago, and so he needs to be able to step back and not, as he would say, be stuck in the meeting room at 10 o'clock on Thursday night trying to figure out what 3rd and 7 call they're going to make. I mean, he just needs to be able to have a bigger picture of view. On the other side of the ball, Matt Patricia is an interesting hire. We know Ryan Day kind of likes guys with NFL experience. He's gone that route before. Matt Patricia is the head coach of the Detroit Lions. It did not go well. He comes from the Belichick coaching tree, part of that New England dynasty. It's funny, a lot of those Belichick guys really haven't panned out as head coaches. but they've been successful as assistant coaches. And, he had a reputation for being kind of having a gruff personality, a little difficult to deal with in Detroit. Obviously didn't go well. I mean, until last year, last couple of years, the Lions have been, godforsaken franchise in the NFL, and he didn't hasten the turnaround. And so I think it was a tough experience for him. Now, you could also say people learn and grow from those kind of experiences. And also, here he's not running the show. He's running Ohio State's defense. It'll be very curious to see what changes they make philosophically and schematically. Jim Knowles had a great defense. I mean, it steadily improved over his 3 years. Last year was the best defense in the country. The bar is high. Now, they lose almost all their players. I mean, they still have three very good players, right? They have Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, of course, and Davis Nigbinosin, returning starters. But everyone else is going to be new in terms of being a starter, although a lot of them have experience. But it'll be very interesting to see what kind of defense do they run? Because Jim Knowles kind of had a style, right? We kind of knew what to expect from a Jim Knowles defense. I don't know what to expect from a Matt Patricia defense.
No, he was known for being fairly multiple. I believe it is his pass stops, and probably has some flexibility of what they would like to do there. But Jim Knowles had a very clear outline philosophy. We'll probably get to learn more about what they will look like with Patricia, and they are having some continuity. They are bringing a new defensive coordinator, but Matt Carreri is the new passing game coordinator. Tim Walton, the secondary coach, is going to be the co-defensive coordinator with Patricia. I do want to talk about Matt Patricia big picture wise, because the public perception around him has changed quite a bit over the last decade during the height of the Patriot dynasty, or the second really era of Super Bowl runs. I mean, you read some of the profiles about him, and they were fairly fawning. He studied rocket science at RPI in college in New York, and a lot of the feature stories about him were meet Bill Belichick's rocket scientist. And then he goes to Detroit, and immediately when he gets hired there, and we should talk about this, or at least acknowledge it, certainly point out as well, when he was hired by the Detroit Lions to be their head coach in 2018, that was the height of the Me Too movement, and there was allegations that surfaced that had not been previously disclosed. The Detroit News broke the story in 2018, I believe, in which when Patricia was in his early 20s, he was on spring break in Texas and was indicted for sexual assault. The case never went to trial, but at the time it was not disclosed. So that certainly, I think, colored the way a lot of people viewed him and still view him during his time in Detroit. And the tenure, for a whole host of other reasons, didn't really go well. So that also, so he brings some baggage to Ohio State at 50 years old, which is different than when he was a younger, rising assistant coach in New England. Yeah,
we should point out that the case was dismissed when the alleged victim didn't show up for the grand jury hearing. I mean, he'd been indicted, but then when it came to actually testify and appear from the grand jury, she did not show up. And like the newspaper story said, they tried to contact her over a period of weeks, and then she never responded to them. So again, nobody knows what happened except the people involved, if anything happened. So, in this country, you're innocent until proven guilty, and he was not even tried. So that should be taken into account. But it is, look, it's out there. And if he had nothing to do with this and he's completely innocent, it's a shame that he is, that this is a, quote unquote blight on his resume. We just don't know what really happened, but yes, it is worth acknowledging, and he will be asked about that, I'm sure, in the press conference.
And I think Ohio State will surely be asked about that when these hires, they're not been made official yet, so nobody's talked publicly about them. You do wonder how Ohio State vetted that process. Did they talk to any of the attorneys or law enforcement involved, or did they just talk to Matt Patricia? What was their process for vetting him and his background?
Yeah, we'll have to wait, and we are not expected to talk to Matt Patricia or Brian Hartline, for that matter, for at least a couple of weeks. I think people are taking vacations, and it's kind of a dead period. Look, they went till January 20th, And then they had to deal with, coaching stuff. Ryan Day's, probably trying to catch his breath a little bit. Spring practice has been pushed back. Is another thing we should talk about briefly. Spring practice was pushed back. It's going to be condensed this year. So this is kind of the window where people can take a break. And so we're not going to be able to talk to Matt Patricia for a couple of weeks, it looks like.
Yeah. It is, I think, with Patricia, I think the hire does really reinforce the idea that Day likes hiring guys from the NFL. This is the second straight offseason where he's tried to hire a former New England Patriots assistant.
Bill O'Brien, yeah.
Bill O'Brien this year, Matt Patricia, and you look down the line of all the coordinator hires that he's made in the past. He's made in his tenure, looking at offensive and defensive coordinator hires, he's hired 8 guys to be his primary coordinator, and 5 of them had ties to the NFL previously as a head coach or an assistant, and then 6th, even Brian Hartline played in the NFL. And on the defensive side of the ball, Jim Knowles is the only defensive coordinator, primary defense coordinator he has had who didn't coach in the league. He started off with Jeff Hafley, who had an NFL background. Kerry Combs had an NFL experience, largely in college and high school, but had spent 2 years previously as the defensive backs coach for the Tennessee Titans. And now kind of goes back to that hiring pattern where he goes after somebody with ties to the league. Matt Patricia has not coached in college since he was a graduate assistant at Syracuse in 2003. I think his background is certainly in the NFL, and it's especially with Bill Belichick. 16 out of the 17 years he was an assistant coach in the NFL was on Bill Belichick's staff. So his roots are firmly in the NFL, and they are firmly in New England, and certainly the pattern suggests that Ryan Day puts a high value on that.
Ohio State runs an NFL program. I mean, their offensive scheme is basically an NFL scheme. They're not running the wing T here. I mean, they're running an NFL offense, and look, it's a. I don't want to say it's a minor league NFL team. I mean, look, they had 15 guys invited to the combine. I don't think it's but that's the model. He's not running a college program. I mean, Urban Meyer, when he came here, was running a college program. The spread was essentially a college thing. I mean, NFL teams have adopted it, but it was essentially a college team or a pro theme. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that that's the route he went. My guess is that Matt Patricia, like Chip Kelly, is a short-term guy at Ohio State. I can't imagine he's here in 5 years. It's like Chip Kelly, now we can say in hindsight, was always going to be a short-term thing. Come back. Look, he pursued NFL coordinator jobs last year and ended up at Ohio State. And I think the understanding was, I don't know this, but I think it's, hey, come here. We got this loaded team. Let's, help us get over the hump, win it all, and then move on. I think Matt Patricia, given he's been in the NFL for so long, he's probably has the same kind of approach.
I mean, the way Ohio State structured its contract with Chip Kelly, where the buyout for him to leave Ohio State was reduced or could even be waived by going to the NFL, certainly I think was an acknowledgement on the Ohio State side that that's where Chip Kelly's interests and future may lie. And if that was going to be his exit or desired exit, they were not going to make it harder for them. So I wonder how much that even influenced Matt Patricia, where he was not in coaching last year. He was the last assistant with the Philadelphia Eagles in 23. Was not in coaching last year, and saw maybe the trajectory of Chip Kelly's coaching career change by being the coordinator at Ohio State for a season and having access to great players. And if you need to kind of go to a place where you can rehab your reputation, Ohio State's a pretty good spot to go in the college game, where you're going to have good players, you're going to have a talent advantage, and if you feel you have a scheme advantage, the deck is certainly stacked in your favor. So if you can't get an NFL coordinator job, and there are only 32 of those, Ohio State's a good place to maybe show what you can do as a play caller.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what Alabama was like under Nick Saban. They would always get these guys who are on the rebound, and they'd rehabilitate themselves in terms of job. In terms of teams wanting them, and that would work out for both sides, kind of a marriage of convenience. And again, Matt Patricia, I would be shocked if he's a long-term guy at Ohio State. I mean, who knows? Maybe he comes here and loves it and blah, blah, blah. But I don't think there's any reason to think that he would be a long-term guy, and that's fine. Look, Ryan Day probably is at a point where he knows, look, we have a national championship under my belt. We're Ohio State. If people leave after a year or two, fine. I'll get the next great guy, right? It's not like you gotta like take a shot at somebody and not have a guy with a strong resume. And he did. Look, he was part of a New England dynasty, Matt Patricia. I mean, no, nobody's saying it was Matt Patricia's dynasty. It was Bill Belichick's and Tom Brady's. But he was there. He played a significant role.
I do. I also wonder if the way that they have structured this staff has been done in such a way where you have a very logical internal candidate to turn to. If Matt Patricia does ultimately return to the NFL, the way they had it on the offensive side of the ball last year was Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator, the primary play caller, and then Brian Hartline was the co-offensive coordinator and very heavily involved in the game planning and putting in passing game concepts. Now on the defensive side of the ball, you have Tim Walton and Matt Carreri, who are well liked by Ryan Day. And if Patricia does return to the NFL, those are two logical candidates then who are going to have a greater role in the coordinating of the defense that you could then tap as your next guy. It's sort of set up that way where they haven't always had a co-coordinator set up, and certainly they did not have that with Jim Knowles when he was the defensive coordinator. They last had that on defense in 2020 when it was Madison and Combs, and then sort of 21 was effectively that way where you had Combs and Matt Barnes who was calling the plays.
Well, I'm not sure I make a lot. I don't make a lot out of titles. I think titles are basically
justifications.
Yes, throw the guy a bone. He was here. He was part of a successful team, and so we're going to give him a raise, and so we'll give him a title promotion too. I don't know that it really changes anything. I don't know that Tim Walton suddenly has a louder voice in the room, or Matt Carreri has a louder voice in the room because they have the title now. I think those guys just, work it out. But the other thing is Matt Patricia, you wonder, okay, he's coming from the NFL to the college. What kind of recruiter is he going to be? Well, he's not going to have a position group. We assume that at least. There's no reason to think he's going to have a position group. So Jim Knowles did not the last year because they hired James Laurinaitis officially as the linebackers coach, although Laurinaitis did a lot of that even before, technically as GA. So I do think that Matt Patricia can just coach. He doesn't have to worry so much. I mean, I'm sure he'll do some recruiting, but that's not why he's coming here, I wouldn't think. It's to run the defense. And, I always have this picture in my mind of Jim Knowles kind of, because he didn't have position players, the position group, just sitting in his office and devising, all these crazy schemes and blitzes and, all this kind of stuff. And, you didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And that was probably more Jim Knowles' personality anyway. And I don't know Matt Patricia at all. Obviously, I don't know what his personality is like, other than what I've seen. And, he'll start with a blank slate. I'm not going to prejudge anybody.
I'll say it probably varies a lot based on his personality. If you ask players from the Detroit Lions about it, they will tell you one story, and his guys in New England will tell you some different as well. So it seems to run the spectrum.
Yeah, a lot of it's based on he was successful in New England and he wasn't in Detroit, and it sounds like when things went south in Detroit, he didn't handle it very well, at least in terms of public persona. It always happens that way. With a winning team, everything's perfect and sunshine and roses. And with a losing team, everything's a disaster. And usually the truth is not quite as cut and dry, but that's the perception of things. But it didn't go well in Detroit. Let's not kid ourselves. It didn't. But he's not in that role here. And let's just say he's gruff and whatever. He's just the defensive coordinator. He's not running the show. He's just the defensive coordinator. And so, I think that the message flows from the top, from Ryan Day down. And if there are any issues, then Ryan Day will handle them. But it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. He'll be fine. Look, Chip Kelly had his reputation of being a little bit gruff too. And with us, he was great. He was, he had a good sense of humor. He very insightful, patient. Look, when we ask questions, sometimes, questions, some are better than others. You're going to get some dumb questions or out of left field questions, and he handled them fine. And so hopefully Matt Patricia will. And if he doesn't, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I think it's fair. You don't have the same responsibilities as being the public face of the program and the way you are a head coach, and the same media obligations, the same way to sort of project an image. And Patricia worked for Belichick too, who's known for being gruff. I mean, that is one difference between his boss in New England, and maybe he was trying to do some sort of Belichickian imitation in Detroit. You're working for somebody who's a little more laid back than I think the man in the hoodie.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Day doesn't view the media as the enemy, and Bill Belichick basically did. And then, I mean, to Belichick, the media was a necessary evil and really not all that necessary. I think that was the half hour of the week that he probably cared the least about and put no effort into it. And look, when you win the number of Super Bowls that he won, who's gonna rip you, right? I mean, you do whatever you want. So
he had the Spygate stuff. I mean, people ripped him for that.
But he didn't care, right?
Yeah,
he just look at my ring. That's what he would essentially say.
It's funny, all the Belichick guys are in college now. Belichick's in North Carolina. His son's coordinator. Belichick's or Patricia's now in Detroit.
Yeah.
Where's Josh McDaniels and Eric Mangini and Romeo Crennel? Where are they coaching?
Oh, boy. I would think Romeo Crennel is retired. I covered Romeo Crennel with the Browns. Jeez. That's crazy. What else do we need to address here? I mentioned the Combine. 15 players, the most of any school. All the names you would expect. I was mildly surprised that G. Scott Jr., tight end, was not invited. Josh Fryer was not invited. That doesn't mean they can't make it the NFL. I mean, plenty of guys who go to the Combine don't make it, and plenty of guys who don't go to the Combine do. So, but obviously, you'd like to go if you're a player. It's helpful. It does tell you kind of where you stand a little bit. I was a little surprised at that, but still, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they're not drafted. But I'm a little surprised that they didn't get picked to go. So it'll be a very interesting, be crowded. Kyle McCord's going too. Kyle McCord will be there. So 16. Does he count Ohio State? Is it like a Joe Burrow thing?
Probably not. Probably
not.
The storyline, I think, for the NFL draft this year is people start to pay attention to that a little bit more is Georgia had a record 15 guys drafted after they won their first of two national championships in 22. That surpassed LSU, which had 14 players drafted. Trying to remember when that was.
LSU?
LSU had a record.
It would have been the 2020 draft.
2020. And Ohio State had 14 in 04 as well. And then Michigan.
04? 04. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but
a lot of the guys from the 02 team.
Yep.
So that is where Ohio State is trying, this group trying to see if they could hit. Michigan
a list of players. 7 offensive players: Will Howard, Travion Henderson, Quinjon Judkins, Emeka Egbuka, Donovan Jackson, Seth McLaughlin, and Josh Simmons on the offense. Defense, all 4 of the linemen: Jack Sawyer, J.T. Tuamoloau, Ty Hamilton, Tyreek Williams. Linebacker Cody Simon, defensive backs Denzel Burke, Lathan Ransom, and Jordan Hancock. Of course,
if it's scintillating content, you just reading off a bunch of names.
I know. Thank you.
So what's the number?
What?
So what's the number after going through all that?
15.
Oh, who were invited to the Combine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. It's 15. Yeah, 15. I said that at the beginning.
So
you don't listen to me. I know you don't listen to me. I know you're like my wife. The Combine is, if you're curious, February 24th to March 3rd. 329 players were invited, so Ohio State is 15 out of 329, which is pretty good. Yeah, that's
it would certainly, if they have a record number of draft picks, or at least match the school record, it would give credence to the idea that this was the most talented roster they've ever had, or something like that. I think you heard all about that last offseason, was how talented the roster. Urban gushed over it. A bunch of the other former coaches gushed over it. Well, the NFL was one of the more reputable judges of talent. They draft the players into their league, and so I think it'll be a useful barometer for trying to gauge how truly talented the roster was. How many of the starters from the 24 title team get drafted into the league.
The funny thing is that 2 players who are obviously not eligible to go to the Combine would have been the 2 highest drafted players, Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith, would have been. I mean, I don't think Ohio State will have any top 10 picks. Depending on the mock drafts you look at, there got some guys maybe in the 10 to 20 range. You see Josh Simmons there occasionally, in some of those drafts. But then it's late in the first round and then through maybe like the fourth round where it's like just a ton of Buckeyes. If I think Jeremiah Smith would be the first pick of the draft. Maybe he'd be among the first 2 or 3 picks.
I think this year he would be because there's no
this year would be
quarterback.
You could draft him, because there's no obvious quarterback. Some great players. Travis Hunter's the Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, look, there are some great players, but I think Jeremiah Smith is has a cliche at this point, a generational talent. And Caleb Downs, I think, would definitely be a top 10 pick. I mean, I don't know, maybe top 5. I don't know. Safeties, it's kind of tough.
The thing that would hurt him is safeties aren't as valuable.
Right. Safeties are not right. But I would have a hard time thinking that Caleb Downs wouldn't be a top 10 pick if he were eligible. I'd have a really hard time. So when you factor 15 of this year's class and then, down the line, you have 17 guys from this team are likely.
Styles who get drafted down the line. Davison Igbenogson will get drafted.
Yeah, right. Sonny Styles, if he has a great year and he came on at the end of last year, I mean, the linebackers, again, a little bit like safeties, are not, valued as high as they used to be. But Sonny Styles can make a push to be a first-round pick. If Igbenogson can cure the pass interference issues and just be as aggressive as he's been and not get the flags, he's everything you want. He's got size. He's got the mentality. He's certainly got, the mindset. He just can't grab guys all the time. It's kind of a basic thing with the position. But, so you're talking about those 3 guys who are, potentially very high draft picks. Jeremiah is obviously, is probably going to be the number 1 pick when he comes out, depending on who the quarterbacks are that year. It's going to be a cavalcade of Buckeyes.
Well, I think we've run through the gamut of Ohio State football news. I will be out next week on taking some vacation.
Tell the folks where you're going, Joey. Do you want to share that with the folks?
No.
Okay.
I'll tell you about it next week.
But I'll be here.
But Bill will be here with. I don't know when Rob gets back.
I don't think that I'll do a podcast because I don't think anything's happening. So I think this will cover us. We never know. It's Ohio State football.
They don't say that. It's Ohio State has been a steady stream of news since the national championship.
Yeah, hopefully this will be a bit of a dead period. They fill the positions, the transfer thing. I guess one little housekeeping note. You want to share the little news about the running back withdrawing from the transfer portal?
That's right. So most of they have 15 players who entered the transfer portal during the winter window. One of them has now returned, Sam Williams-Dixon, who's withdrawn from the portal. So he should be returning, kind of like last year where Bryson Rodgers went in and then did a little U-turn.
Well, I think that about covers it. I think we're about done here, Joey. What do you think?
I think so. As always, if you want the latest news around Ohio State football, visit us at dispatch.com/sports. And thanks for making the BuckeyeXtra football podcast part of your listening diet. Thanks for joining us on this episode. And if you enjoy the podcast, feel free to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Helps
a nice review, please.
I don't tell you should just. It's okay if you don't like us. But if you do like us, we encourage you more than others to leave us.
Well, if Rob were on here, we would say that. But, we want you to like us. Rob, I don't think wants you to like us. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody.
Be sure and subscribe to the BuckeyeXtra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.